Welcome to the Voice of African Library podcast, where we'll explore the vibrant and diverse world of African libraries and literature.
Together, we will discover all about the African librarianship, its history, growth, and current state.
Hosted by
Asmaa, Bouaamri
and Fredrick Otike, two scholars and professionals in library information science.
We will be sharing a diverse range of content, including books from African authors, academicians, magazine articles, and other resources.
Join us in exploring the oral tradition of African knowledge and some of the interesting aspects of the shared culture in Africa.
We will discuss the challenges and beauty of translating African literature into different languages.
The podcast will feature a diverse range of guests, including librarians, researchers, authors, musicians, actors, and professional athletes from around Africa.
They will share their unique ways of acquiring and sharing information and knowledge, providing a rich tapestry of African perspectives.
The purpose of the podcast is to promote African literature and the writing culture as part of the current civilization.
And you know what?
Africa is known for its rich heritage of proverbs.
African proverbs are widely recognized for their wisdom, cultural significance, and how they summarize life lessons, values, philosophy, and poetic forms.
These proverbs have often been passed down through generations and are an integral part of the African oral tradition.
As a famous African proverb for this first episode,
if you want to run fast, run alone.
And if you want to run far, run together. So, as a first introductory episode for this podcast, we will be introducing ourselves. And Fredrick, you start first?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Asmaa. My name is Fredrick, as you already mentioned, Fredrick Otike. I come from Kenya. By educational background, I'm a librarian and also a teacher. I've been working in the academic library for approximately, 12 years. And I've also taught. I've been so much into teaching languages and also library information studies. My research interest basically is in library research, information literacy, knowledge management, and also what I'm doing right now. I think about podcasting as a way of sharing information to the diverse world and the new generation that is coming. Because we discover that at the moment, trajectory changing as far as in access to information, and that's why we are here today to at least try to inculcate the dissemination of information in a diverse way.
Okay. For me, I will thank you first for your introduction. And for my part, I'm called Asmaa Bouaamri. I come from Morocco and I come from a diverse background. I studied journalism, I studied mathematics and applied mathematics, and I studied also anthropology, cultural anthropology. I studied library and information science. And as you said, we had this idea for a while now to start podcasting because we saw the different media and the changes and the trends happening now, and we discovered that there are no African podcasts that are directed to libraries, right?
Yeah, sure.
And this is why we wanted to share weekly information about libraries, what they are doing in Africa, how they are doing, and also have fun as well. Share information with the public, share also some new knowledge or some new literature, or make it famous if it's not known, but also make it known for the general public or for the international audience, instead of just keeping it locally known and hiding it maybe from the international public.
Yeah, basically it's called information dissemination.
Exactly.
Sure.
And since we are information scientists and information curators, so we think that this is very important, what we need to provide to the audience and what we need to share with the people. So we think this is a good initiative also for librarians to move and to acquire and the new changes, and for librarians or librarianship as a whole, I think, right?
Yeah, sure. Basically, the target of this podcast is mainly targeting, but not limited, but also targeting early professionals in library, librarians, readers, book fanatics, and the general public who are interested in acquisition of knowledge. What do you think about Asmaa?
Yes. So for us, why we thought about making an African podcast about librarianship or libraries, because we have a rich African culture that is very diverse, that cannot be restricted or limited to one podcast actually, but we wanted to just give one perspective, our perspective of it, from information scientists and librarianships. And we also discovered that information is scattered, so
Sure.
we wanted to share and make available to the general public.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's something that is really funny about libraries in Africa and the library as a profession in general. Because you see, like for example, in Africa, we've got the African Union, but you don't have a African Library Association or something that is meant to unite the African library. And despite all this, that we find that Africa seems to be a forgotten continent as far as the representation of library is concerned. Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not very well represented, and also I can see also in Morocco we don't have a library association. So I don't know about Kenya, or other regions as well. So it is still not a very strong field in Africa.
Yeah, because it looks like as if, in as far as the library profession is concerned, we look like as if we are really scattered, because you see from the northern part of Africa, it's different. They're mainly united with the Asian communities, and then we've got the Western Africa. They also seem to be having their own association, and then we've got also the Sahara. So mainly due to that, people tend to think that the library is a dying profession, and I think that's not the thing. So I think part of the discussion we'll be doing in this podcast is some of enlightenment about some of these things, and we see exactly the trajectory that libraries are going through at the moment, right?
Exactly. There is a change in trajectory, and the image that is sought as from gatekeepers to becoming dynamic community hubs and facilitators for information and learning and accessibility of literacy and technology as well. So we need more active African libraries and librarians, and also education in libraries and librarianship. And this is why I think this is important, or this podcast is important, just to provide attention and make aware policymakers, also make aware the population, and make aware professionals, or even the interested researchers and other professionals, to this field of research and this field of profession as well.
Yeah, because if you look at all the other professions, like the doctors, the lawyers, they've got a strong association. And if you're not able if you're not going to be ambassadors in as far as the library is concerned, the general public tend to feel that the library is dying, because people normally say that librarianship is always perceived as a dying profession for several reasons. Like, for example, they say because of digitalization of information. They talk about the budget cuts and the funding issues. But you see, we've got other issues. We've got other ways that we can be able to tackle this thing, and part of it is by sharing and engaging with people, because now people think that because nowadays we've got ICT changes whereby the library, they've got self-check systems and technologies.
What are ICTs?
Oh, sorry. That information communication technologies, exactly. Whereby now we've got new technologies, like for example libraries. We find at the moment the issue about self-checks. So people think that some of these things are kind of like they're changing the roles of the library, but you see, library also need to change and being innovative.
Yes, exactly. So if we go back to the history, African cultures are not based on written cultures, but they are based on oral traditions. So we tend to not give importance, or we still have this majority not giving importance to the written cultures, while we have this oral tradition that we can also use as well. And nowadays we are using podcasting as an oral tradition to share knowledge. So this is also another modern way to share knowledge. And this is why we want also to transfer this written knowledge into oral tradition as well, for people who are preferring to listen to podcasts instead of reading, or prefer having suggestions from professionals instead of looking for the information themselves. So we tend here through this podcast to facilitate the transfer of knowledge and information. Right?
Yeah, sure. And then also the other thing I think is that most probably I think fascinates me, that Africans were poor writers. Yeah, because most of the information that we normally get, we always wait for the Westerners to come and write something for us, because we've got very few authors. we'll discuss about this later on. It's subject to debate, I know.
Yeah. It's we are not poor writers, but we lack fundings. We like big editors, we like big production companies and stuff. Not like in Western culture, they already have this marketing for libraries, for books and stuff. But we have writers, but most of them, they don't have the proper funding to survive with only writing, and then they tend to neglect this part of themselves to do other jobs, I think.
Yeah, but if you look at the education system, when the colonial masters came into Africa and they told us that they made us feel that we're dependent on the written communication.
Exactly, and now actually it's very interesting. That's what anthropology is doing, or social science are doing.
Mm-hmm.
They are going to smaller communities or indigenous communities to take the knowledge from them, this knowledge that was transmitted from one generation to another, which are basically oral traditions, and then they are changing it to written culture. And then this is how knowledge is transmitted. So you cannot say that in Africa the knowledge that is there is not valid or valuable. So I think it's just a way of the word is shifting toward more writing now instead of oral traditions. And now we did not have this habits of writing when we were growing up and stuff, but we have writers and we have talents. Like either they are writing in local languages, so they are not very famous, and their writings are not really known to the general public. So it depends actually.
But if I ask a question about the northern part of Africa, when we talk about, for example, Egypt, remember they used to write on the papyrus or the tabs. I don't know about Morocco where they used to write, because I think all this confusion that's the one that bringing all the confusion in Africa, because you see we had some people using the sign languages. I think if my history in about Egypt is concerned, I think they had some writings.
Yeah.
And then that was before colonizations.
Yeah.
And I know in Sub-Sahara, I think the colonials, I think they killed our culture, so most of our culture is not that much documented as it is in Morocco, most probably.
And for this last part of the podcast, what we planned is to present to the audience African books and authors, right, Fredrick?
Yeah, sure.
And for my part, I will be choosing one book, and Fredrick will be presenting as well one book. Yeah. And the chosen book for this week, or what I preferred, because it's a book that I liked and that means a lot to me, and which is The Simple Past from the author Driss Shreibi. And this is a controversial book by Driss Shreibi, who is a Moroccan author and one of the pioneers in Moroccan literature, written in French. And this book saw the light in 1954, just before Moroccan independence from the French and Spanish colonialism. And it created a rage when it came from Moroccan and the French critics, because in this book, Driss Shreibi, who is also the character in the book, narrates his coming of age during the French colonialism and the challenges of the traditions in Morocco represented in his father. And the character also revolts against his father and the French colonial powers, reflecting also the the colonial period in Morocco, reflecting on the Islamic traditions and as a religion practiced in Morocco, the subjections of women, and finding, as his novel does, a voice for his freedom. So this is a really good book that I recommend. It's a good literature that I really enjoyed reading and that I can read anytime or whenever I'm bored. This is a go-to book for me, at least.
Wow.
And what about your book, Fredrick? What did you choose for us today?
Basically, I did not choose a book per se, because I think Kenya is divided into, I think, 47 ethnic groups and different tribes. But I think for me, I decided to talk about an author, famous author, is called Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Ngugi wa Thiong'o comes from one of the tribes in Kenya, and he's a famous author. He's known mainly by writing his books on his local dialect. So most of the books, apart from the ones which have been translated, I can be able to attest to them and see exactly what I've read about them. But something funny about this author Ngugi wa Thiong'o is that he has been known to be talking so much about colonialism, post-colonialism, and the struggles, resistance, and oppressions, and the complex issues in Africa, and especially in Kenya. And I think at some point he had gone to asylum, I think, in America, and up to now he's still in America. But after some time he was able to come back. But some of his works that has been able to catch the attention of very many people, of which some of them have been translated, is like The Petal of the Blood, The Grain of Wheat, The River Between, which is some of the books which vividly depict the colonial rule of African communities and subsequent quest for independence. Through rich characters, their development, and nuisance narratives, Ngugi explains, according to the author, he explains that the clash between Western influences and indigenous cultures portrays themes of cultural rivalry and the preservation of African identity. According to him, he believes that for an African, for you to be able to grow up and for you to be able to be a real patriot of your country, you're supposed, first of all, to start with your mother tongue, with your local language, before you go into the colonial languages. And that's why most of his books, if you find most of them, they're not readable. You could not read it because they were in the local dialect. But at the moment, some of them are being translated. And if you read the books categorically, they just talked about the struggles and the neo-colonialism that is happening, because we cannot avoid this issue. And I think it needs to be said, because despite the fact that Africa we've got independence, still feel that still having neo-colonialism because of corruption, poor leadership, and such like stuff.
Yeah.
And some of these books, that's what they've been sharing, and that's why I felt that instead of talking about a particular book, which at least for me it might be hard for me to identify one, instead to talk about an author. But I think in the subsequent podcast I might be able to choose one or two books. But I think his contribution was immense, and I think it was worth mentioning today.
Yeah, so you chose an author, I chose a book. So next time maybe I chose an author, you chose a book. It's fine.
Yeah.
But the both authors that we share today, they speak about colonialism. That is really, you can see that they expressed it in written, and you can see that there was a problem.
Of course.
And they had to. This is like these two authors share these post-colonial or colonial ideas that probably they wanted to express in writing in different languages. Like even if Driss Shaibi wrote in French, he never wrote in Arabic or in Moroccan Darija, but your author wrote in the local language. So yeah, I think each perspective is to be respected, because some can be directed to the community where the author comes from. Some are directed to the authority that is applying its power on the country. So yeah, I think it's a good share for today. Thank you, Fredrick.
Yeah. You're most welcome. I'm eager to hear more about your author next time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Fredrick.
So, thank you for joining us on this African journey through the Voice of African Library podcast.
We hope that you enjoyed this first episode, and we promise you more diverse and rich content. Stay tuned for more interesting insights and knowledge about the African culture and librarianship.
We'll appreciate if you could share the podcast with your networks, and we'll be glad to hear your thoughts and feedback.
Together we say,
see you next time.